The sun was just beginning to dip behind the distant hills, painting the sky in streaks of gold and lavender, when Emily and her grandfather made their way down the dusty back road. The air was thick with the scent of wild grass and old wood, the kind of scent that clings to memories long after the moment has passed. Their small town, Willow Creek, sat quietly at the edge of nowhere, just a cluster of weathered houses, a main street with more empty windows than open ones, and fields that stretched out like patchwork quilts, stitched together by years of hope and hard work. Emily was only 7, but she carried herself with a quiet determination that made her seem older. She was a girl of gentle curiosity, always asking questions, always searching for something more in the world around her. Her grandfather, Henry, walked beside her, his steps slow but steady, his hands rough from a lifetime of farm work. He didn't say much, but Emily knew he listened to every word she said. They were headed to Old Man Jenkins's place, a ramshackle property at the very edge of town. Jenkins was known for his stubbornness and his collection of broken things, rusted tractors, cracked windows, and, as Emily would soon discover, forgotten lives. Emily's heart beat a little faster as they passed through the creaking gate, her eyes scanning the overgrown yard for signs of adventure. "Stay close, Em," her grandfather murmured, his voice low and protective. She nodded, gripping his hand a little tighter. As they approached the barn, Emily caught a flicker of movement near the shadows. She paused, squinting through the fading light. There, half hidden in a nest of straw and mud, was a dog, a German shepherd, thin and battered, his coat patched with scars and dirt. A length of frayed rope tied him loosely to a fence post. He looked up as they drew near, his eyes dull but watchful, his body tense as if expecting another blow. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She knelt down, careful not to startle him. "Grandpa, look," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and hope. Old Man Jenkins shuffled out of the barn, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. When Emily asked about the dog, Jenkins just shrugged. "He's no good anymore. Hurt his leg. Eats too much. If you want him, he's yours. $5. Emily's grandfather hesitated, glancing at the dog, then at his granddaughter. "Sweetheart, are you sure?" he asked gently. Emily didn't hesitate. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out 5 crumpled dollar bills, her entire savings from months of helping her grandmother gather eggs and sweep the porch. Her hand shook as she offered the money to Jenkins, who snatched it without a second thought. "He's your problem now," he muttered, turning away. But to Emily, the dog was never a problem. He was a promise, a silent plea for kindness, a chance to prove that broken things could be made whole again. She knelt beside him, her voice soft and steady. "You're safe now," she whispered. The name came to her as naturally as breathing. "Ranger. That's what I'll call you." Ranger didn't resist as they untied him. He stood, weak but willing, and followed Emily out of the yard. His limp pronounced, but his spirit unbroken. That quiet walk home, with Ranger at her side and her grandfather watching over them, was the beginning of something neither of them could have imagined. When they reached the farmhouse, Emily set to work. She gathered blankets and fresh water, making a soft bed for Ranger in the old barn. She brought him scraps from dinner, sat beside him as the night grew dark, and read him her favorite stories by the light of a flickering lantern. Her grandparents watched from the kitchen window, uncertain but unable to deny the hope that had crept into their granddaughter's eyes. In the stillness of that first night, Emily stroked Ranger's fur, whispering promises of safety and belonging. For the first time, the weary dog let out a soft sigh, as if he understood that he was finally home. And so, in a forgotten corner of a forgotten town, a girl and her wounded companion began to heal, one gentle touch, one whispered word, one act of quiet courage at a time. The next morning, The world outside the farmhouse was painted in the soft light of dawn. Emily woke with a sense of purpose she'd never felt before. She hurried through her chores, her mind already on the barn and the wounded companion waiting for her. The air was crisp, filled with the sounds of birdsong and the distant lowing of cows, but to Emily everything felt new. Inside the barn, Ranger lay curled on the blankets she'd arranged the night before. His eyes opened as she entered, wary but not afraid. Emily knelt beside him, careful to move slowly. She offered him a bowl of fresh water and a slice of leftover ham, speaking softly all the while. "Good morning, Ranger. Did you sleep okay?" Her voice was gentle, as if she were talking to a frightened child. Ranger sniffed the food, but hesitated before taking a tentative bite. Emily watched, her heart swelling with hope at even this small sign of trust. She could see the toll his old injuries had taken, the way he favored his left leg, the scars that crisscrossed his fur, the way he flinched at sudden noises from the yard. But she also saw something else, a flicker of spirit, a stubborn will to survive. Emily made it her mission to help Ranger heal. Each day, she followed a routine. She'd bring him food and water, clean out his bedding, and sit with him for hours. Sometimes she'd read aloud from her favorite books, her voice filling the quiet barn with stories of adventure and friendship. Other times, she'd simply sit in silence, letting Ranger get used to her presence. Her grandparents watched with a mix of concern and admiration. At dinner, her grandmother would shake her head. "That dog's been through a lot, Emily. Don't get your hopes up too high." But her grandfather, Henry, saw the determination in his granddaughter's eyes. "Let her try," he'd say quietly. "Sometimes, all a soul needs is a little kindness." The first few days passed slowly. Ranger barely moved from his spot, except to eat or drink. He never barked, never growled. Just watched Emily with those tired, amber eyes. She noticed how he tensed whenever someone entered the barn too quickly, or when a door slammed shut. It was as if he expected the world to hurt him, and he braced himself for it. But Emily was patient. She spoke to him in soft tones, always announcing her presence before approaching. She brought him small treats, bits of cheese, slices of apple, a piece of her sandwich. She even placed her favorite stuffed animal, a threadbare rabbit named Mr. Buttons, beside his bed at night. "He's good company," she whispered, tucking the rabbit under Ranger's paw. One afternoon, as Emily sat brushing hay from the barn floor, she glanced over and saw Ranger watching her intently. For a moment, their eyes met. And Emily smiled. "You're safe here, Ranger. I promise." She didn't expect a response, but then, slowly, Ranger's tail gave a tiny, uncertain wag. It was the smallest of gestures, but to Emily, it meant everything. She rushed to the house, bursting with excitement. "Grandpa." Ranger wagged his tail. "He's getting better, I know it." Her grandfather smiled, his eyes softening. "That's a good sign, Em. Just keep doing what you're doing." As the days turned to weeks, small changes began to take root. Ranger started to eat more, his appetite returning bit by bit. He ventured outside the barn, following Emily as she did her chores around the yard. He still limped, but the stiffness in his movements began to ease. Emily took to brushing his coat each evening, her gentle hands working out the tangles and dirt. She spoke to him about everything, her dreams, her fears, the loneliness she sometimes felt since her parents moved away for work. Ranger listened, his presence a quiet comfort. In return, he began to trust her, inch by inch. He would rest his head on her lap as she read, or nudge her hand when he wanted to be petted. Emily's grandparents noticed the change, too. The barn, once a place of chores and storage, became a sanctuary, a space filled with laughter, stories, and the slow, steady rhythm of healing. Still, there were setbacks. Some nights, Ranger would whimper in his sleep, his legs twitching as if running from unseen dangers. Emily would wake and hurry to his side, soothing him with gentle words and soft strokes. "It's okay, Ranger. I'm here. You're safe." In those moments, she realized that healing wasn't a straight path. It was a journey, full of ups and downs, hope and heartbreak. But Emily never gave up. Every morning, she greeted Ranger with a bright smile and a cheerful, "Good morning, buddy." Every night, she tucked him in, making sure he was warm and comfortable. She believed, with all her heart, that love could mend even the deepest wounds. By the end of that first month, Ranger was a different dog. He still carried his scars, both inside and out, but he walked with a little more confidence. His eyes, once dull and wary, now shone with a quiet gratitude. And Emily, for the first time in her life, felt truly needed. Together, they forged a bond that neither time nor hardship could break. In the quiet barn at the edge of Willow Creek, a girl and her dog began to teach each other what it meant to heal and to hope. As summer deepened in Willow Creek, the days grew long and warm, and the bond between Emily and Ranger only strengthened. Yet, even as Ranger's body healed and his spirit brightened, there were moments that hinted at a life he'd once lived, a life shrouded in mystery and pain. It started with little things. One evening, as Emily's grandfather sat in his favorite armchair, the television flickered with an old military documentary. The distant sound of marching boots and sharp commands drifted through the open window. Ranger, who had been dozing at Emily's feet, suddenly snapped to attention. His ears pricked forward, his body went rigid, and his eyes fixed on the sound as if he were awaiting orders. Emily noticed immediately. "Grandpa, look at Ranger," she whispered, watching as the dog seemed to transform before her eyes. The gentle companion she knew became alert, almost soldierly. When the program ended and the music faded, Ranger relaxed. But the image lingered in Emily's mind. The next morning, another strange thing happened. Emily was helping her grandfather feed the chickens when she accidentally dropped a metal bucket. The clang echoed across the yard, startling the birds into a frenzy. Before Emily could react, Ranger darted forward, positioning himself between her and the noise, his body tense and protective. He scanned the area, as if searching for danger, then relaxed only when he was sure Emily was safe. It was as if something deep inside him had been triggered, an instinct, a memory. A lesson learned long ago. Later that week, Emily and Ranger were playing in the yard. She pointed her finger like a toy gun and shouted, "Bang!" To her astonishment, Ranger instantly dropped to the ground, rolling onto his side and lying perfectly still, eyes closed. Emily stared, wide-eyed. She had never taught him that trick. That evening, as the family gathered on the porch, Emily recounted the day's events. Her grandfather listened carefully, his brow furrowed in thought. "Emily," he said quietly, "that dog's been trained. Not just to sit or stay, real training. The kind you see with police or military dogs." Emily looked down at Ranger, who now rested peacefully beside her, his head on her lap. "Do you think he remembers who he was?" she asked softly. Henry nodded. "Maybe he does. Or maybe he's trying to remember. Sometimes, when you've been through something hard, it takes a while to find yourself again." The conversation stayed with Emily. She found herself watching Ranger more closely, searching for clues about his past. She noticed how he always kept an eye on the door, how he seemed to know when someone was approaching before they even knocked. He was gentle with her, but there was a seriousness to him, a sense of duty that never quite faded. One afternoon, as Emily sat in the barn reading, a thunderstorm rolled in. The first crack of lightning sent Ranger scrambling to her side, pressing close as if to shield her from the storm. Emily wrapped her arms around him, whispering soothing words until the thunder passed. She realized then that Ranger wasn't just protecting her, he was also seeking comfort, reassurance that he was safe. Word of Ranger's unusual behavior began to spread among the neighbors. Mrs. Callahan, who lived down the road, stopped by with a basket of muffins and a curious look. "That's a special dog you've got there, Emily," she said. "I've never seen one so well trained. Where did you find him?" Emily told her the story, and Mrs. Callahan listened, nodding thoughtfully. "You know, my brother served with the K-9 units overseas. He always said those dogs were heroes in their own right. Maybe your Ranger was one of them." The idea took root in Emily's mind. She began to wonder about Ranger's life before Willow Creek, who had trained him, what he had seen, what had brought him to that lonely barn. She spent hours at the town library, reading about military dogs and their handlers, piecing together a picture of courage and sacrifice. But even as she searched for answers, Emily never lost sight of the present. She continued to care for Ranger with the same devotion, celebrating every small victory. The day he barked for the first time, the afternoon he chased a butterfly across the yard, the night he curled up beside her bed instead of in the barn. Her grandparents watched the transformation with quiet pride. Henry, in particular, saw echoes of his own past in Ranger's journey, a past marked by hardship and resilience, by the slow, steady work of healing. Sometimes, he told Emily one evening, "The things we survive make us stronger. But it's the love we find afterward that helps us heal." As the summer wore on, Emily realized that Ranger's story was still unfolding. The shadows of his past lingered, but with each passing day, they grew a little less dark. Together, they faced the unknown, two souls, both searching for a place to belong. Both learning that even the deepest wounds could be mended with time, patience, and love. Late August brought a restless energy to Willow Creek, the air thick with the promise of storms and the hum of insects in the tall grass. Emily had grown used to the comforting rhythm of her days with Ranger, but she had no idea how quickly everything could change. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, when the world seemed to hold its breath in the heavy heat. Emily, chasing a monarch butterfly, wandered farther than usual toward the edge of the woods behind her family's farm. Ranger padded faithfully behind her, his ears alert, tail swishing gently as he watched her skip and laugh. The grass grew taller near the tree line, brushing against Emily's knees. She was so focused on the butterfly's delicate dance that she didn't notice the rustling in the undergrowth. Suddenly, with a guttural snort, a wild boar burst from the brush, its bristled back arched, tusks gleaming in the sunlight. The animal charged, eyes wild with fear and aggression. Emily froze, her heart hammering in her chest. The world narrowed to the sound of the boar's hooves pounding the earth and the roar of panic in her ears. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. But Ranger did not hesitate. With a bark that split the silence, Ranger leapt between Emily and the charging animal. He positioned himself squarely in the boar's path, his body low, teeth bared, every muscle tensed in defense. The boar skidded, surprised, and Ranger circled, barking and snapping, driving the animal's attention away from Emily. The standoff lasted only seconds, but to Emily, it felt like forever. Ranger dodged and feinted, always staying between her and the threat, never backing down. Finally, with a frustrated grunt, the boar turned and crashed back into the woods, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Emily collapsed to her knees, trembling. Ranger trotted back to her side, licking her hand gently, his body still quivering with adrenaline. Tears streamed down Emily's face, not from fear, but from overwhelming relief and gratitude. She threw her arms around Ranger's neck, burying her face in his fur. "Thank you, Ranger," she whispered through her sobs. "You saved me. You really saved me." By the time Emily and Ranger returned to the farmhouse, her legs were still shaky. Her grandfather met them at the door, Concern etched deep into his weathered face. When Emily told him what had happened, Henry knelt beside Ranger, running his hands gently over the dog's body, checking for injuries. "He's a brave one," Henry said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "He's not just a pet. He's a protector." That night, the family sat together in the kitchen, the events of the day hanging heavy in the air. Emily's grandmother made tea and fussed over Emily, but her eyes kept drifting to Ranger, who lay at Emily's feet, watchful and calm. Word of Ranger's heroics spread quickly through the small town. Neighbors stopped by to check on Emily, bringing homemade pies and casseroles. Some came just to see the dog who had faced down a wild animal to save a little girl. For the first time, Emily saw her quiet, private family at the center of something larger, a wave of kindness and curiosity that rippled through Willow Creek. The incident changed something in Emily, too. She realized that Ranger's loyalty ran deeper than she'd ever imagined. He wasn't just responding to training or instinct. He had chosen to protect her, to put himself in harm's way for her sake. The bond between them, forged in quiet moments of healing, had been tested and proven unbreakable. But the day also left its mark on Ranger. That night, he limped more heavily than usual, and Emily noticed a fresh scratch along his flank. She cleaned the wound carefully, whispering words of comfort as she worked. "You're safe now, Ranger. I won't let anything hurt you, I promise." As she tucked him in, Emily felt a new sense of responsibility settle over her. She understood now, in a way she never had before, what it meant to care for another being, to trust, to protect, to love without hesitation. The next morning, as the sun rose over Willow Creek, Emily found Ranger waiting for her at the barn door, tail wagging, eyes bright. She knelt beside him, pressing her forehead to his, and whispered, "We're a team, you and me, no matter what." And as they stepped out into the new day, side by side, Emily knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, bound by loyalty, courage, and a love that had already proven itself stronger than fear. The morning after Ranger's act of bravery, Emily's grandfather, Henry, was unusually quiet at breakfast. He kept glancing at Ranger, who lay under the table with his head on Emily's feet, as if guarding her even in sleep. When Emily finished her oatmeal, Henry cleared his throat. "I think it's time we get Ranger checked out proper," he said. "He's earned it." Emily nodded, sensing something important in her grandfather's voice. Together, they loaded Ranger into the old pickup truck and drove into town. Willow Creek's animal clinic was a small, cheerful building tucked between the feed store and the bakery. Dr. Harris, the town's only veterinarian, greeted them at the door with a warm smile and a gentle hand for Ranger. Inside the exam room, Dr. Harris knelt beside Ranger, speaking softly as he ran his hands over the dog's body. He checked the healing scratch from the bore, then paused, his fingers lingering at the base of Ranger's neck. "There's something here, Dr." Harris murmured, frowning in concentration. He pressed gently and felt a small, hard lump beneath the skin. "Looks like a microchip. Let's see if we can get a reading." He fetched a scanner from the counter and carefully passed it over Ranger's neck. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a faint beep, a string of numbers and letters appeared on the screen. "Dr." Harris's brows shot up in surprise. "Well, he whispered. "This isn't just any dog." He turned the screen for Henry and Emily to see. The information was brief, but unmistakable. Name: Bravo 9. Affiliation: United States Military K-9 Unit. Status: presumed lost in action. 2 years ago. Emily's heart pounded as she read the words. She looked at Ranger, who sat calmly by her side, unaware of the revelation. "Ranger, you were a soldier," she whispered, awe and sadness mingling in her voice. Dr. Harris explained what the chip meant. He was part of a military unit, probably trained for search and rescue, maybe even explosives detection. These dogs go through years of training. They're heroes, every one of them. Henry listened intently, his face grave. How would a dog like that end up tied to a fence in Willow Creek? Dr. Harris shook his head. Sometimes, after an accident or explosion, dogs get separated from their handlers. If they're injured and can't be identified right away, well, not every story has a happy ending. But it looks like Ranger found his way back to someone who cares. As the truth settled in, Emily felt a swell of pride and sorrow. She thought of all the times Ranger had flinched at loud noises, the way he guarded her so fiercely, the tricks he knew that she'd never taught him. It all made sense now, his training, his trauma, his need for a safe place to land. Dr. Harris offered to contact the military authorities to let them know Bravo 9 had been found. Emily's stomach twisted at the thought of losing Ranger, but her grandfather squeezed her shoulder gently. Let's do what's right, Em. We'll see what they say. On the ride home, Emily was quiet, her mind racing with questions. She remembered the stories she'd read in the library. The tales of K-9 heroes who had saved lives and comforted soldiers in the darkest of times. She realized that Ranger's scars were not just marks of pain, but badges of honor. That evening, Emily sat with Ranger in the barn, her arms wrapped around his neck. She whispered to him about what they'd learned, about the life he'd lived before he found her. Ranger listened, his eyes soft and understanding, as if he knew that his secret was finally safe. "You were a hero before I met you," Emily said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But now you're my hero, too." The next day, Dr. Harris called with an update. The military had received the information and was grateful to know Bravo 9 was alive. They wanted to send someone to Willow Creek to verify his identity and discuss what would happen next. Emily's heart ached with uncertainty. She couldn't imagine her life without Ranger. But she also knew that heroes deserved to be recognized and that sometimes love meant letting go. As the sun set over Willow Creek, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Emily sat on the porch with Ranger's head in her lap. She stroked his fur and whispered, "No matter what happens, you'll always have a home with me." In that quiet moment, Emily understood that true love was not just about holding on, but about honoring the journey that brought them together. Whatever the future held, she and Ranger had already changed each other's lives forever. News of Ranger's true identity spread through Willow Creek faster than a summer storm. What began as a quiet revelation at the animal clinic soon became the talk of every porch, diner booth, and feed store aisle. Dr. Harris, moved by the story and the bond between Emily and her dog, called in a favor from an old friend who wrote for the local newspaper. Within days, the headline appeared in bold print, "Forgotten K-9 hero found by young girl." The impact was immediate. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves now stopped by the farmhouse with gifts, homemade dog treats, new collars, handwritten cards. Some brought their children to meet the brave dog who had survived so much and still found the strength to protect. Others came simply to shake Emily's hand, their eyes shining with gratitude and awe. For Emily, it was overwhelming at first. She had always been a quiet child, more at home in the barn with Ranger than in a crowd. But as people gathered on her family's porch, sharing stories and laughter, she began to see how much Ranger's journey meant to others. Veterans from nearby towns drove in, some with their own retired service dogs, to pay their respects. One elderly man, his jacket heavy with medals, knelt beside Ranger and saluted, tears streaming down his face. "He saved more than just lives on the battlefield," the man said, voice trembling. "He reminded us what loyalty looks like." Emily's grandparents, once wary of the attention, opened their home to the community. The kitchen filled with the aroma of fresh pies and coffee. The living room buzzed with conversation. People lingered long after sunset, drawn together by the story of a girl and her dog who had found each other against all odds. As the days passed, Emily noticed a change in Willow Creek itself. The town, once quiet and divided by old grudges and hard times, began to come alive. Neighbors helped each other fix fences, shared harvests, and organized a fundraiser for the local animal shelter in Ranger's honor. The sense of unity and kindness grew stronger with every retelling of Ranger's story. Emily, too, felt herself changing. She found her voice, speaking in front of crowds at the town square, sharing what she had learned about courage, hope, and the healing power of love. She told them how Ranger had taught her that even the most broken souls could find their way home, and that sometimes the smallest act of kindness could change a life forever. Through it all, Ranger remained at Emily's side, a steady presence, calm and dignified, accepting every pat and treat with quiet gratitude. He seemed to understand that he was no longer just her protector, but a symbol of resilience for the entire community. One evening, as the sun set over Willow Creek and the last guests drifted away, Emily sat on the porch steps beside Ranger. She watched the fireflies dance in the warm twilight and listened to the distant sounds of laughter and music from the town square. For the first time in her life, she felt truly connected, not just to Ranger, but to everyone around her. Her grandfather joined her, settling beside her with a contented sigh. "You know, he said, his voice soft and proud, "I think you and Ranger brought this town back to life." Emily smiled, resting her head on Ranger's shoulder. "We just needed each other," she whispered. "And maybe the town needed us too." As night fell and the stars blinked awake above Willow Creek, Emily understood that their story had become something bigger than either of them, a beacon of hope. A reminder that even in the darkest times, love and loyalty could light the way home. The days after the article appeared in the Willow Creek Gazette were filled with a new kind of anticipation. Emily's family received a call from a representative of the military K-9 program, confirming that Bravo 9 Ranger had been identified and that a team would visit soon to verify his condition and discuss his future. The news sent a ripple of uncertainty through the farmhouse. Emily tried to stay hopeful, but each morning she woke with a knot in her stomach, afraid that someone might come to take Ranger away. The official visit arrived on a bright Saturday morning. Two uniformed officers, one of whom was a retired handler, stepped out of a government SUV and walked up the porch steps. Ranger, sensing something different, stood at Emily's side. His posture alert but calm. The officers greeted Emily and her grandparents with warmth and respect, explaining that their first priority was Ranger's well-being. They examined Ranger, noting his injuries and the gentle way he responded to Emily's touch. The retired handler knelt and spoke softly to Ranger, using old commands. Ranger responded, but his eyes never left Emily. It was clear to everyone that his loyalty had found a new home. After the exam, the officers sat down with the family at the kitchen table. They explained the military's policy. When a working dog retires, the first option is to reunite the dog with its original handler. If that isn't possible, law enforcement agencies may adopt the dog. Only when those options are exhausted can a civilian family provide a permanent home. 123. Ranger's original handler, they explained, had been injured and was now living in another state, unable to care for a dog due to his own medical needs. Emily listened as her grandfather asked careful questions. "What happens if Ranger stays with us?" Henry inquired. "He would be officially retired," the officer replied. "He wouldn't be allowed to work in law enforcement or military service again. He would just be your dog, free to live out his days in peace. As a member of your family." 123. The conversation turned to the challenges of adopting a retired military dog. The officers explained that these dogs often carry invisible wounds, nervous exhaustion, anxiety, and sometimes trouble socializing with other animals or new people. They emphasized the importance of routine, patience, and understanding. 124. Emily nodded, already knowing these things by heart. After a long pause, the retired handler looked at Emily. "He's chosen you," he said quietly. "I've seen dogs like him before. Once they find their person, that's where they belong." The family was given a few days to make their decision, but Emily already knew her answer. That night, she sat with Ranger in the barn, her arms wrapped around his neck. "You're my best friend," she whispered. "If you want to stay, I'll do everything I can to make sure you're happy and safe." When the officers returned, Emily and her grandparents signed the adoption papers. Ranger was officially retired, no longer a soldier, no longer a stray, but a beloved member of the family. The officers congratulated Emily, reminding her that she was now responsible for a true American hero. Word spread quickly through Willow Creek. The community, already united by Ranger's story, rallied around Emily and her family. Neighbors offered to help with vet bills, and local businesses donated food and supplies. The town's animal clinic even set up a fund to support other retired service dogs in need. Emily felt the weight of responsibility, but also a deep sense of pride. She knew that Ranger's journey had not only changed her life, but had inspired her entire town. Together, they had given a hero the peaceful retirement he deserved, a place where he could finally rest, surrounded by love. As the sun set that evening, Emily and Ranger walked the familiar path behind the farmhouse. The air was filled with the sounds of crickets and the scent of wildflowers. Emily looked down at Ranger, who walked beside her with a steady, confident stride. She smiled, knowing that no matter what the future held, they would face it together, partners, friends, and family, forever.